Hello, students. Good morning. Welcome to the session of English Literature. This session has been introduced to you by me, Rajendra Prasad Meena. Earlier, we have discussed about the thoughts of Plato over criticism. Today, we will talk about Aristotle's views on criticism. Here, we would talk about Aristotle's mimesis, which is the way to attain the truth. So let's start. While the Platonic world of phenomena is one that cannot lead to the truth but only to sense perceptions, Aristotle views the world as an ever changing process in which the reality is located and manifested by the inward principle of order of either a natural or artificial product. He denies the existence of Platonic ideas apart from the particular things and believes that the changing process itself is a fundamental reality. Any natural process as a raining or artificial process as the making of a house is pregnant with the truth and itself a manifestation of reality. So here we can say that Aristotle was against the theory of Plato. He tries to find out reality in everything. According to Aristotle, everything artificial or natural have a truth in it. Consequently, the process of imitation is not one that involves the slavish copy of appearance or images, but one that involves the inward principle of order and hence the truth. He gives an example of making a house in his physics. So, what is the example? Let's see. Thus, if a house exempli gracia had been a thing made by nature, it would have been made in the same way as it is now by art. And if things made by nature were made also by art, they would come to be in the same way as by the nature. In this example, natural process is perfectly identified with an artificial process. So, an analogy can be made to a poet's imitation. A poetic imitation is first of all a process which involves the inward principle of order of the work itself. The poet takes a poem from nature and reshapes it in all principle of order of the work itself. The poet takes a poem from nature and reshapes it in a different medium. This can be best exemplified by what Aristotle calls the soul of tragedy, the action of plot. Tragedy is essentially an imitation not of a person but of actions and life, of happiness and misery. All human happiness or misery takes the form of action. The action is a natural process itself. By imitating the action, the tragedy takes a form from nature and reshapes it in a different medium, that is, primarily language and words. Poetry, along with other artistic forms such as painting or music, is thus an improvement on nature into that the poet has brought to completion what nature operating with its own principles is still developing. From such a sense, poetic imitation is not only justified as a process in which the truth locates, as against Plato's position that poetic imitation is thrice removed from the king and from the truth, but also further elevated as a way to make improvement of on what nature is still developing. So here Plato says that poetry is just an improvement of what has been done already, and he wants to say that the poet picks up a theme from the nature and tries to reshape it. Apart from the view that imitation is itself a natural process where reality locates, Aristotle furthers his point in Poetics that poetic imitation is superior to history in reflecting truth by proposing his principle of probable or necessary. The one history describes the thing that has been, and the other poetry a kind of thing that might be. Hence, poetry is something more philosophic of greater import than history, since its statements are of the nature rather of universals, whereas the history are singulars. By a universal statement, I mean one as to what such a kind of man will probably or necessarily say or do, which is the aim of poetry. Further, he argues in his preference of poetry that what has happened only deals with the particulars and the accidental, whereas what will probably or necessarily happen, poetry relates to those which are of a universal nature. So, through poetic imitation, the poet handles those events which comply with the principle of the probable or necessary, and therefore advances in truth a nation referring to what things should be rather than what things are or have been. So, imitation is justified also as a process of creation, the poet also the creator. Another point Aristotle holds in his Poetics concerning imitation is that it is not only a part of human nature but all brings delight to man. It is clearly that the general origin of poetry was due to two causes, each of them part of human nature. Imitation is natural to man from childhood, that he is the most imitative creature in the world and learns at first by imitation, and it is also natural for all to delight in works of imitation. The second point is proved by general human experience. For example, though the dead body is painful for the human eyes, it is a great delight to see them most vividly and authentically represented in paintings. So, is the poetic imitation. Aristotle not justifies the delight brought by tragedy, but also advances to make efforts to lay rules for his form of imitation. He, like a well-trained physician, devotes several chapters discussing what a kind of plot is best for a tragedy and how the imitation can achieve a moralizing effect, namely by arguing pity and fear accomplish its catharsis of such emotions. Aristotle, through such efforts, he remotely opposes to the Plato's dismissal of poetic imitation as a way to corrupt the mind of its citizens through its appeals to the lowest part of human soul. As a conclusion for Aristotle's contribution to the concept of imitation, 2 points should be noted. First is, in opposing his mentor Plato, reality into the estimat and suggests it in part of human, and answering Plato's doubt about the positive function of poetry, he proposes catharsis of emotion brought by tragedy, hence defending poetic imitation from an ethical point of view, hinting the poetry as a social effect of emotional purgation. Thus, through this discussion, through this session, we have known about what Aristotle thinks about poetic imitation and what Plato thinks about poetic imitation. The two critics are very different. While talking about imitation, uh, for Plato, poetic imitation brings away from the truth, and for Aristotle, it is the way of attaining the truth. And he says uh, poetry is more important than history, more philosophical than history. So there has been a very illustrated discussion have been done about poetic imitation of Aristotle. It is enough for today. We will further discuss Horace in the next session. So be ready for that. Thank you.